Hello everyone, Joe Talks here. Sorry it has been 16 months since my last video. I, if I'm gonna be honest, I didn't think I'd come back to YouTube video creation at all, but here I am today. I have gotten the inspiration to uh, participate in the Monster Week for Dungeons and Dragons, and this week is Monster Week Fae, so I wanted to cover something that I haven't really seen many other people cover recently. I wanted to go over the best Fae sidekick options in Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition. Now, let me show you what I'm talking about. Today, I'm using Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, and specifically, I am going to cover the sidekick rules and the sidekick options and which monsters of CR one half or lower of the Fae options in there in the 2024 and 2014 monster manuals, which of them would serve as the best sidekicks for your campaign. Now, I know best is a subjective term. What I mean is more effective. I'm sure everyone wants a good sidekick to be able to help them, whether it be inside or outside of combat. And the Fae are some of the most chaotic creatures around, so it only adds even more fun to your D&D games. So, without further ado, let's go over the sidekick rules first and how sidekicks work. So, sidekicks are special NPCs that you can add to the party, or are special monsters that you can customize as a DM to basically use in your campaign. And sidekicks have three special classes: expert, spellcaster, and warrior. These special classes align with certain archetypes in a party. For example, expert is like the rogue of the party, spellcaster is very self explanatory, and warrior is kind of like the fighter. And these sidekicks can count as a party fill in spot if, for example, you're running a table full of, well, more like lack of party members. Like, for example, you only have two or three people in the party and you want to fill that out a little bit so that if they're facing a bigger challenge, it's not unfair. They do slow down the game a bit if you are using them for combat, so keep that in mind. It's best to have maybe one sidekick if you have a decently sized party. Me personally, I run a side game. There's three sidekicks, but the party can only use one at a time in combat, so that's a good way of balancing that out. So, the sidekick, it says here the sidekick must be a friend of a party member. You don't need to follow this. You could just have them join the party, through a very specific way. And I know I'm using this advice for DMs, but like players could most definitely ask their DM for a sidekick in a campaign. Anyways, let's get into each of these classes first, and that way you can decide whether or not certain Fae monsters would work specifically well with a very specific sidekick class. Oh, and before I forget, it says here that sidekicks will only be able to take ability score increases at certain levels. I personally allow feats, but it I understand why it's just ability score increases. It could get complicated very fast. Just wanted to add that little side note there. So let's start with the expert. As I said before, the expert is the rogue equivalent in the party, and they get some extra stuff on top of that. So the expert can choose one saving throw between dexterity, intelligence, or charisma to have proficiency in, as well as 5 skills and light armor. If it is humanoid or has simple or martial weapons in its stat block, it gains proficiency in all simple weapons and 2 tools of your choice. So already right there, that's one of the big strengths of having an expert sidekick. If each party member doesn't really have certain skills and don't cover all the bases, you could bring in an expert sidekick to be able to fill in those gaps and help them out. Let's say, for example, you have a barbarian, a wizard, and a fighter, and none of them really have any expertise in religion, then you would just have the expert have proficiency in religion. Also, at first level, and this can be very nutty very quick, the expert can use the help action as a bonus action, which is so perfect for any party member who needs that advantage on their next attack. They can't really do a lot of damage in combat, they're more so a normal support, but sometimes that's all you need. Second level, they get cunning action just like the rogue. Third level, they get 2 proficiencies to have expertise in, which is double proficiency bonus. They get their ability score improvements at 4th, 8th, 10th, 12th, 16th, and 19th level, so that's 6 ASIs over the course of their journey if, for whatever reason, you do make it up to level 20. At level 6, they get Coordinated Strike, which is when they use their help action to help a party member attack and do damage, you add 2d6 damage to the attack, which is really nice. You're going to want to be using the helpful feature very often, if not making sure the sidekick has survivability in hiding, disengaging, what have you. Level 7, you get Evasion. You take no damage on a successful dexterity saving throw and half damage on a failed one, rather than full on failed, half on success. Inspiring Help. When the sidekick takes the help action, the creature who receives the help gains a 1d6 bonus to the attack roll. Or at least I think that's what it is. I haven't read it in a while. The creature who receives the help also gains a 1d6 bonus to the d20 roll. If it's an attack roll, the creature can forego adding the bonus to it. Then if the attack hits, they add it to the damage instead. Okay, so yeah, basically you choose whether or not to add it to accuracy or to damage. Oh, and I forgot to mention, Coordinated Strike is a ranged help, which is kind of like, I'm pretty sure what was that rogue subclass called? I'm gonna need one moment. The Mastermind Rogue. Yeah, the Mastermind Rogue has a ranged bonus action help action, which is really nice. This is basically that. And Sidekick deals extra 2d6 damage next time it hits. Not you. That's what level 11's about. Sorry for that mix up. 14th level is the Rogue's Reliable Talent feature. So if you're playing 2014, the experts get this feature 3 levels later. If you're playing 2024, they get it 7 levels later than Rogue. But yeah, Reliable Talent is, I like to consider it one of the best features in the game. Because you can't roll lower than a 10, even if you do, for any ability check in the entire game. That is nutty, and I love it. 18th level expert feature, Sidekick gains another proficiency in a saving throw. This is meant to mimic the slippery mind feature of the rogue, where they gain wisdom saving throw proficiency, or in the case of 2024, wisdom and charisma saving throw throw proficiency. And then the expert's capstone is the bonus dice granted by the Sidekick's inspiring help feature increases to 2d6, which was already in the 11th level feature, but it's just also stayed here. But yeah, that is the expert. Let's move on to the spellcaster next. Spellcaster's more straightforward. They are a half caster, so you get cantrips, up to 4 cantrips from certain spell lists. Your spells known go all the way up to 11, which is surprisingly low, but it can be okay if you use this specific class with a monster that can do spellcasting or has a good spellcasting stat. And yeah, they'll never be able to go past 5th level, but that's okay. Because why would you want the sidekick to go further than a main party member? So, bonus proficiencies, wisdom, intelligence, or charisma, so basically one of the mental saves. Proficiency in 2 skills, so a lot less than the expert. Proficiency in light armor and simple weapons. Now, the special part about spellcaster is depending on which subclass is the term I'm using. For this class, you get a different spell list to choose from and a different spellcasting ability. If the role or subclass of the spellcaster is mage, you get the wizard spell list to choose from and intelligence as your spellcasting ability. If it's healer, you get both cleric and druid, and wisdom's your ability. And then probably the best one, and the one that I'm going to heavily focus on later, prodigy, which gives the bard and warlock spell list with charisma as the spellcasting ability. Warlock spell list. Keep that in mind. Keep it in the back of your head, because this is going to go so hard later. You get 2 cantrips and 1 first level spell of your choice at the start, but it has that aforementioned scaling. Spell save DC and attack modifier are the same as a full caster, and you need a spellcasting focus depending on the different role for that spellcaster. They get their ability score improvements at 4th, 8th, 12th, 16th, and strangely enough, 18th level. I don't know why they did this. I don't know why this was done here. This is never really done again. It seems like a weird level to get given ASI, even if it's a sidekick character. But regardless, those are the levels. Level 6, you basically get the evocation wizard's ability, Potent Cantrips, where you add your spellcasting modifier to the damage dealt with any cantrip that deals damage. For example, True Strike or Firebolt, you add +5 if your spellcasting ability is 20. At level 14, you choose one of the 8 schools of magic, which is Aberration, Conjuration, Enchantment, Divination, Illusion, Necromancy, Transmutation, for Evocation. Sometimes I forget that one. Whenever the sidekick casts a spell from one of those schools of magic, specifically the one you chose, and if they spent a spell slot to do it, they add their spellcasting ability modifier to the damage or healing roll, if any. This is not a major bump in any sort of way, but that's okay, because spellcasters are broken compared to marshals. And then their capstone's a really good one. They cannot lose concentration on a spell by taking damage. So, simpler compared to the expert and what features they get, but there's a lot of freedom of choice with this one. And as you'll see later, my favorite choice for a Fae sidekick uses one of the three roles that spellcaster uses. I think you know which one, but we'll get to that later. Finally, we've got warrior, which is very much fighter light. Lite, fighter light. So they get one saving throw, two skills, proficiency in all armor, and in shields and all weapons. They also get a specialty in their training. Unfortunately, it is not a fighting style, even though I wish it was, but this is the next best thing. The sidekick can either be an attacker, in which they get a +2 bonus to all attack rolls they make, or a defender, where they get a special reaction to impose disadvantage on attack roll against an ally within 5 feet. So pick whichever one you feel is best. Personally, I like attacker better, but if you want the sidekick to not overshadow the player characters, defender is the better choice. Next, second wind at second level is the exact same as the fighter feature, but there's less uses here. Improved critical from the champion fighter subclass comes at level 3, where the sidekick will score a crit on 19 or 20. Absolutely bonkers. I don't know why they thought this was a good idea, but what's done is done. The ability score improvements are slightly less than a fighter. You got 4th, 8th, 12th, 14th, 16th, and 19th level for your ability score improvements. Extra attack comes at level 6, and it increases to 3 attacks at level 15. And if the sidekick has a multi-attack feature, they can either use extra attack or multi-attack on a turn, not both. This is to prevent, any sort of broken combos that may happen if you're using both options, or to prevent any, let's say, confusion. You only get to use one. Level 7, the sidekick has advantage on initiative. Level 10, their AC is increased by 1. At level 11, they get a use of Indomitable, of which they get another use at level 18. So, yeah, fighter light, but also they get some stuff to help them stand out a bit. Now that we know what each of these classes do for a sidekick, let's go into which monster choices are the best for each sidekick. I'm going to go down the line alphabetically, and they can only be monsters of a challenge rating 1/2 or lower. So if you try to pick one higher, that's just against the rules, that's not going to work. First up, and this is one of my personal favorites out of the options we have, the good old Blink Dog. Now, I'm going to cover both 2024 and 2014, but we're going to start with 2024. It is mostly the same between both versions. I have the stat block on screen for anyone who wants to take a screenshot, look at it, save it, whatever you want to do. The major feature that Blink Dog has is the ability to teleport. It teleports up to 40 feet to an unoccupied space it can see as a bonus action. It needs to recharge it at the end of each of its turns afterwards, though. You need to roll a 4 through 6 on a d6. That's the square die for anyone who wants to know what a d6 is. And they are within the range to be a sidekick. And their bite feature goes off their dexterity in 2024. In 2014, their bite goes off of strength, which is not as good. so they have less likelihood to hit and they deal less damage. So if you're playing 2024, Blink Dog looks a little better by comparison, but don't be dissuaded if you're playing the 2014 version of the game, because are Blink Dogs are lawful good. They're very loyal, I would say, and yeah, they're just as good as boys. I mean, look at this. Just look at this. Now, what classes would work best for Blink Dog? Well, unfortunately, Blink Dog really only has one option since they can't really speak a language, though they understand Elvish and Sylvan, and that would be the Warrior. Because Blink Dogs, because they cannot really speak, they can't cast spells with verbal components. So that would really hamper any ability for the Blink Dog to work as a spellcaster. But yeah, Blink Dogs, I would say, work best with Warrior. You could try to make them work with Expert, and that would be good as well, as that would give them more bonus actions to use. Although, personally, you're better off sticking with Teleport as the bonus action. So, yeah, Blink Dog is very solid for showing. It's got good health, decent stats across the board. It doesn't have any negatives. So you get to have a good old Fey themed doggo walking next to you. Next up, we have the Bullywugs. Now, 2024 did something interesting with monsters where they gave separate stat blocks based on different partying levels. This would be the normal Bullywug adaptation. And then there's another Bullywug of a higher CR, of which we can't use here, but that would be more appropriate to fight or talk to with a higher level party. Bullywug warriors, personally, are not that great. Their AC is better than the Blink Dog. They can swim 30 feet. They've got stealth in case that matters. And they can speak with frogs and toads. Just lovely. Plus, they get a special insectile rapier attack, which deals extra poison damage on top of it being a normal rapier, and their bonus action is reusable every turn. The problem is, you definitely don't want Bullywug warriors to be your spellcaster. Intelligence and charisma are the dump stats on this uh, adorable but quite frankly not good monster. I'm sorry to all the Bullywug fans out there, but it's just not really going to work out. The health is also very fragile. And, with a sidekick, you really don't want them to go down every other fight. And even with 11 health, that's really not going to scale all too good throughout the course of a campaign. That said, if you were going to use a Bullywug warrior, their best would also be the warrior class, thanks to their special insectile rapier attack. 2014 Bullywug is a little different, though. It still has some of the same weaknesses, as a better swim speed and a worse land speed, but it has swamp camouflage, and its special leaping is not tied to a bonus action. And it has multi-attack, which makes it better early on. Of course, it does have neutral evil tied to its stat block, which for anyone who's using alignment, that might be a problem for you. Personally, I don't really use alignment all that much, so this is a non-factor. But if that is a turnoff for you, then definitely don't go with Bullywug. Alright, now if we've done Bullywug, let's time to move on to the classic Goblin, specifically the Goblin Warrior, because Goblin Minion is noticeably weaker and less reliable in a fight. Goblin Warriors also don't have very good health compared to Blink Dogs, but their AC, like Bullywugs, is pretty good. They have stealth proficiency, they get their own equipment, they can speak Common and Goblin, so it's ill-advised, but you could try to make them spellcaster. Definitely don't. Definitely don't. Uh, Goblin Warriors, I would say, definitely also Warrior. Dang, Warrior's just getting all of these guys so far. And the only reason I say that is because Goblin Warrior already has Disengage and Hide as its bonus actions. Even the OG Goblin has Nimble Escape, which is Disengage and Hide. Goblins historically are not the best race to use for rogue or rogue adjacent classes. But Warrior, on the other hand, and I mean it's in the name, would be a good fit for goblins. And I should know because the very first sidekick that my home game recruited is a goblin warrior. And sometimes he does help in combat a little bit when things get tough. Not all that good, but he helps. Next up, Hobgoblin Warrior, and by extension, Hobgoblin. Hobgoblin Warrior is a fair bit stronger than the Goblin, with an AC of 18, which is honestly pretty good early on if you're playing to have sidekicks early on. Hobgoblin Warrior, frankly, might be a little too good for an early inductee into your party, since Hobgoblin Warrior has pack tactics. Not the YouTuber, the feature. Pack Tactics gives the Hobgoblin advantage on an attack roll if a creature or an ally is within 5 feet of the creature he's attacking. So, for example, you have a friend to the side of your target, you get advantage. And what's interesting about the Hobgoblin Warrior's weapons, the longsword deals 2d10, which is honestly insane for the CR is at, and the longbow, which looks like it deals normal damage, 1d8, and then it gets a whopping 3d4 poison damage on top of that. So, Hobgoblin Warrior can very easily slot into the warrior class. They can also work as expert, since there's no bonus action here in their stat block. So, yeah, pick whichever one you want. Also, the original 2014 Hobgoblin deals less damage, but they deal an extra 2d6 damage if they hit a creature with a weapon attack. Oh, martial advance. Oh, okay, this is just different pack tactics. Pack tactics. This is just pack tactics, but different. They deal extra damage instead of have advantage. Which is honestly weird. Thank gosh they switched to pack tactics. But yeah, Hobgoblin Warrior, very good with Warrior or Expert. You can try to make Spellcaster work here though, because they have good intelligence and wisdom, or, they're at least decent if you want to lean into that. You do need to be able to have cantrips or spells that are spell attack rolls to take advantage of pack tactics, though. Excuse me. So far, it looks like the warrior class is working the absolute best with our options so far. Blink Dogs can't cast spells. bullywugs are horrible casters. Goblins and hobgoblins are just straight up better as warriors than anything else. But our next option is the exact opposite, and one that I think you'll find very interesting. This is the pixie. So I don't have a picture because all of the options of pages I could pick from didn't have pictures. But pixies have an alarming stats spread where, oh yeah, they have bad strength, bad constitution, decent mental scores, and 20 dexterity. 20 dexterity. Let that sink in. Pixies have 20 dexterity. And pixies, I'm going to be honest, in the 2014 version of the rules, are just flat out the best sidekick in the game. And I'm going to show you why. So, in the 2014 rules, they have a fly speed of 30 feet. They don't have flyby, so they would provoke opportunity attacks if they flew away. But a fly speed, you can do a lot with a fly speed in Dungeons and Dragons. They have magic resistance, so they have advantage on effects against saving throws against spells and magical effects. And they have innate spellcasting, which scales off charisma, which happens to be their best spellcasting stats. So they very easily fit into the slot of spellcaster, specifically the prodigy. You could also use healer since they have a wisdom of 14, but prodigy would probably be the better pick for Pixie. And in 2014, they have so many spells for the challenge rating they're at. Spells that are frankly absurd at where they are, or at least where they were. They had Druidcraft as their one cantrip, and then once a day, for free, they could cast Confusion, which is a 4th level spell, the Dancing Lights cantrip, Detect Evil and Good, Detect Thoughts, which is a 2nd level spell, Dispel Magic, which is a 3rd level spell, the very, very good Entangle, Fly, which is a 3rd level spell, Phantasmal Force, Polymorph, which is a 4th level spell, and Sleep. Notice how I specifically highlighted Polymorph. Polymorph. Oh dear God. If you're playing the 2014 rules, please do not add a pixie as a sidekick right away. Polymorph breaks the game that early on. Especially since it's a charisma saving throw, and monsters, historically, don't have very good charisma saves. Of course, that also applies to intelligence, right? Saves and sometimes strength saves early game. But yeah, Polymorph can just end encounters right then and there because you can just turn whatever it is you're fighting into a little frog and go on your merry way. That is insane. And it's part of the reason why Conjure Woodland Beings was broken in 2014 because you could summon 8 pixies and they could all cast polymorph. Oh dear God. This is just straight up the best one. In 2014, they do have a weakness and of which they only have 1 hit point. But I mean, when you have polymorph and you can turn invisible as an action without even casting a spell, whenever you feel like it, sometimes a 1 hit point is not going to matter. In 2024, thankfully, pixies are not nearly as absurdly broken. Their stats are mostly the same. They get more hit points so they don't die right away. But you'll notice in their spellcasting column, or the part where they have spellcasting. Oh, 1 second. Sorry about that. So you'll notice in their spellcasting section, they don't have any spells above 3rd level. And the only 3rd level spell they have is Fly, which they can only cast once a day. That, frankly, is far more balanced for a CR 1/4 monster. Most of the spells the Pixie had in 2014 that they could cast once per day each are gone. With them only having Sleep, Detect Thoughts, Fly, Invisibility, of which they can only cast on themselves, Druidcraft, and Dancing Lights. But to make up for that, they get Fairy Dust, a special attack roll they get where they deal 1 damage but apply the charmed or poison condition until the start of the Pixie's next turn. This gives a whole different kind of utility that's honestly refreshing. It either gives an enemy disadvantage on their checks and attack rolls, or it makes them unable to hit the Pixie by essence of being charmed. That way, the Pixie is more survivable, and you can actually have a Pixie follower who doesn't just drop dead via fly swatter. But yeah, if you couldn't tell already, Pixie is the best, and I mean the best choice out of all these options today for the Prodigy spellcaster. And especially since there's the Warlock spell list tied to Prodigy, of which you can choose Eldritch Blast, which also works with the Potent Cantrip spellcaster feature, adding your spellcasting ability modifier to every Eldritch Blast you have, which is up to 4 by level 17. If you play that far, but you know what I mean. Pixie can work with Warrior, but you only have 2 strength and 8 constitution, so you really shouldn't be on the front lines as a Pixie. You could be a ranged Pixie, but you're still very much a martial. Spellcasters really need to be in the back, and 15 charisma, 8 constitution screams spellcaster. Pixie could also be expert, but that's just more utility that doesn't really play into the tool set the Pixie has. Alright, with all of that spiel out of the way, what do we possibly have next that could hope to try to topple Pixie? Well, let's see. Next up is the Satyr, which is slightly different across the 2 rule sets, but Satyr in 2014 has magical resistance, very normal weapon attacks, and a ramming attack that does 2d4 damage, which can be useful, and they have good hit points, so they're very unlikely to die on like the first round of combat. Plus, they have some skills that they can use, which works really well with Expert, since you'll get even more skills and expertise at 2 different points in your career. And with a good dexterity score, that really helps you to proc evasion more often. They could also work as Prodigy spellcasters, or even as Warrior. The Satyr, in my personal opinion, can work with just about any of these 3 options, and you'll do fine. In 2024, they get a special Wisdom saving throw attack that doesn't do a whole lot, and then a hoof attack instead of a ram attack, which pushes a medium or smaller creature 10 feet. It does less damage, but the push is very valuable. Satyr, in my personal opinion, is better as an expert or a prodigy spellcaster because you have plenty of skills already and you get even more as an expert, so you can be a master of many things with a satyr. Or, lean into that 14 charisma and Eldritch Blast stuff. Next, we have the Sprite, our second to last option, and the only option of which warlocks can use Pact of the Chain to summon. So, the Sprite is okay. Is a good scout with a +8 in stealth. Not very much strength at all, but good stats elsewhere, like 14 intelligence, 13 wisdom, and 18 dexterity are pretty good. You get an enchanting bow that does 1 damage but inflicts a charmed condition, so not as good as the Pixie's fairy dust, but still very viable in diffusing encounters in a way. Sprites can also cast invisibility on themselves, which adds further credence to their stealthiness, and Heart Sight, of which you can find out a creature's emotions and alignment if they fail a charisma saving throw. Here's the thing, though. Sprite, if you wanted to go the spellcaster route, Sprite is not as good as Pixie, because Pixie has the charisma to lean into Eldritch Blast. Sprite, yeah, they can still do some spellcasting, especially as a mage spellcaster, so he could go wizard levels, quote unquote, and use Firebolt or Ray of Frost. It's not as effective as Prodigy, since Eldritch Blast just deals more damage than every other cantrip in the game. If that was something you really wanted out of your sidekick. What the Sprite lacks in damage on that end, though, they have greatly in stealth and utility potential. Because the Sprite, I'm going to say it, is most likely your best option outside of Satyr for the expert class. Because with their 18 dexterity and, the expertise you can give to stealth, they will be the best scouts you have in your party. It couples with evasion pretty well. They can use help as a bonus action. They can turn invisible when they don't need to attack. They can just stay invisible and help on the sidelines with the helpful feature, or even use cunning action if it comes down to it, to stay relatively out of harm's way. Sprite, honestly, would be your first or second best choice with the expert. Warrior, they could kind of do okay in that too, as long as you're using dexterity weapons. With 18 dex, you can very easily use the warrior and proc those 19s and 20s. Okay, it's I'm sorry, it's just sending me that champion fighter's unique ability is like sometimes everywhere. But yeah, that's what we have for Sprite. I'm just gonna move on to our final choice, the Warg. And you may be asking, isn't a Warg a monstrosity? And you're technically right, because in 2014 rules, the Warg is indeed a monstrosity, not a Fae. Or at least that's how it was ruled in the stat block. But in 2024, considering its lore of coming from the Feywild, the designers changed it to be a Fae, and therefore I'm gonna cover it. It has very good physical stats. Already, we are seeing Warrior once again, which is not a bad thing. I never said it was a bad thing. It's just the first half of these creatures that we've gone over so far fit very snugly into the Warrior class. Wargs only have one attack, but that one attack has some utility behind it. It is a bite attack, and the next roll made against the target by anyone in the party other than the warg, before the warg's next turn, has advantage. Which really helps if you are struggling to land attacks on that one big boss you're fighting. Technically, it could work as a healer spellcaster with its 11 wisdom and ability to speak goblin and warg, so it doesn't have the same weakness there that, say, a blink dog would. But why would you make the warg a spellcaster when it has 16 strength? Warg doesn't really have any skills either, so it's a bad pick for the expert. It doesn't even have arms, it just has paws. So the only viable choice for Warg is Warrior. And those were the 8 Fey creatures I wanted to go over today for Fey Week. Now, what are my suggestions, once again, for which monsters should be which classes, if you wanted to incorporate them in your games, or if you were a player and you wanted to play a sidekick? Well, if you wanted to play a blink dog, a warg, a bullywug, goblin, or hobgoblin, hands down your best choice is going to be warrior, as that plays into what each of these creatures already have, while not stepping on the toes of what they already can do, like in the case of the goblin. And of those 5, the best choices, depending on what you need, is hobgoblin, where hobgoblin very reliably can hit thanks to pack tactics and has a high AC. Blink dog can teleport if you need it to go long distances, and it has a decent amount of health. And warg, because it gives the rest of the party advantage to hit an enemy when it attacks. Sorry, bullywug and goblin. Goblin's decent, but yeah. In terms of expert, there's only really 2 options, the satyr and the sprite. Now, personally, if you're going for a scout sort of character, the sprite is the best one, without contest. Anything else, though, satyr might just be better, especially in roleplay circumstances, and if you need a face and the party doesn't have one, due to 14 charisma. And then in terms of spellcaster, you could still pick sprite or satyr, but there's also the pixie, which is, even to this day, still the best spellcaster choice for 5e in both rule sets. There's just no better option. Despite the bad health and worrying lack of strength, Pixie has spells innately, and you would just be adding more so that it could use its once per day spells more often with spell slots. And that just about covers what I want to go over today. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please give it a like if you enjoyed. Leave a comment telling me what your opinions on the Fae sidekicks are. And then, even other than the Fae, what are your favorite sidekicks to use in a D&D campaign? Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you again soon. Bye bye.